I've been in this business long enough to know when something feels off. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when the Johnson family walked through the doors of our funeral home. They were grieving the loss of their matriarch, Mrs. Eliza Johnson. 91 years old, passed peacefully in her sleep. Nothing tragic about her death, but the sorrow still hit the room like a wave. They brought a photograph, black and white, a younger Eliza, her smile soft, eyes proud. They asked for a closed casket ceremony. She wouldn't want people to remember her that way, the daughter had said, folding the photo into my hand. We prepared the viewing room as we always do. Candles, soft lighting, her favorite hymns on loop. Everything was perfect, till it wasn't. It started with the casket itself. It arrived late, an hour later than scheduled. The delivery guys blamed the rain, but there was something about it that gave me pause. It was heavier than usual. The finish was wrong to sari wood instead of walnut, which the family had requested. A minor error maybe, but when you've done this job as long as I have, small details matter. I called the supplier. They insisted it was the correct order, confirmed twice. I considered pushing back, but the family was due in 20 minutes, and the casket was sealed, per their request. No viewing. No need to open it. I let it slide. Big mistake. That evening, I stayed late, not because I had to, but because something about the entire day felt unsettled. I walked the halls after the last mourner had left. The chapel lights were low. I stood at the back of the room, staring at the casket beneath the spotlight, feeling the strangest sensation in my chest. Not grief, not exhaustion, dread. And then I heard it. A knock, not loud, just a soft, deliberate tap from inside the casket. I froze. Logic kicked in, probably the old building settling, or the cooling of the metal causing a shift. What happens? Sound carries strangely in these old halls. But then it happened again. 3 knocks this time. Rhythmic. Intentional. I backed out of the chapel and locked the door behind me. The next morning when I returned, I found the casket moved, not opened. Not tampered with, just off-center, by at least a foot. I called my assistant Michelle, who had opened up before me. She swore she hadn't touched it. No one had been in that room since I locked it. We both stared at it, neither of us willing to say what we were thinking. Maybe it was on uneven flooring. Maybe someone had bumped it the night before. But I knew the truth. I didn't sleep that night. And by the next morning, I'd made up my mind. I was going to open the casket. I needed to know. The Johnsons hadn't asked for a viewing, but I justified it to myself as a check on the mix-up with the wood grain. If I was going to face some complaint later, I wanted to be sure. I opened it slowly. It wasn't Eliza Johnson inside. The body was male, middle-aged, eyes wide open, skin pale, mottled, mouth frozen in a shape I can only describe as screaming. I slammed the lid shut so hard, the wood splintered, and my breath caught. My hands trembled. This wasn't just a mix-up. This was something else. I called the supplier again, gave them the order number. The representative put me on hold. Came back 5 minutes later, sounding confused. There's no record of that casket being dispatched, he said. In fact, that serial number belongs to a unit destroyed in a fire 3 years ago. I didn't respond. I just hung up. I called the Johnsons, gave some excuse about needing to switch the casket due to minor damage. They were gracious, didn't ask many questions. When we arranged for the burial, we used a new casket. One that I triple-checked. I made sure Eliza's remains were respectfully placed where they belonged. But the other body, it was gone. The original casket, the one that showed up out of nowhere, vanished the night before the burial. One moment it was there, sealed in our prep room. The next morning, the room was empty. No signs of forced entry. No footage on the security cams. Nothing. Just a single black feather left behind. We don't get birds in the building. Not ever. Since then, I've had strange calls. Anonymous inquiries about casket availability, always asking about cherry wood, always around 2:00 a.m. And every so often, the chapel lights flicker at night, and I swear I hear those same 3 knocks. I've learned to ignore them most nights anyway, but I'll never forget that face in the casket. That mouth frozen in terror. And those eyes wide, unblinking, staring at something or someone. Still pray I never meet. People think the creepiest part of working in a funeral home is being around the dead. They're wrong. It's the ones who don't stay dead that haunt you. This happened 6 years ago, back when I was still working in a small-town funeral parlor just outside of Helena, Montana. It was quiet work, predictable. The kind of job where everyone knew everyone, and funerals felt more like reunions than farewells. Then we buried Jonah Carter. He'd been a local mechanic rough, solitary, no real family to speak of. Just a niece who'd de-moved to Seattle and couldn't make it back for the service. He died of a heart attack in his shop. The coroner cleared it, natural causes. We prepared the body like usual. Cleaned, dressed, casketed. The viewing was small. Few old customers, some neighbors, one priest. The whole thing lasted an hour. I remember because I was the one who carried the casket to the van. I drove it to the cemetery myself. I lowered it into the ground. I watched the dirt go over it. Jonah Carter was buried. That should have been the end of it. 3 days later, I came in for the early shift. I usually check the prep room first, make sure everything's set for the day, that nothing was left out the night before. That morning, the air smelled wrong. Not like rot, not like chemicals. It smelled cold, like wet soil and old copper. I opened the prep room door and nearly dropped my coffee. There was a body on the table. Not on a gurney, not wheeled in. It's lying flat on the embalming table like it had been carefully placed there. It was Jonah. Same work boots. Same stitched-up chest incision. Same stitched smile I'd given him after setting his jaw. Impossible. I backed out of the room and checked the intake logs. No recent arrivals. No transports overnight. Nothing logged. I pulled up the security footage. Every camera between the main door and the prep room was blank. Between 1:03 a.m. and 2:07 a.m., just static. Exactly 4 minutes missing. I called the cemetery. The groundskeeper, an old guy named Walt, picked up, and I asked him to check Jonah's grave. He went quiet for a second, then said, "You might want to come see this." I drove over. Jonah's plot was disturbed, not dug up, but sunken. Like something had pushed upward from inside. There were fresh fingerprints on the inside of the grave marker, deep scratches in the brass plate, and the worst part, the casket was still down there, empty. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe it? Instead, I cleaned up the prep room, sealed Jonah, put him in cold storage. I kept the lights on. Slept in my office for the next 2 nights with a baseball bat and a Bible next to me. But on the 3rd night, he disappeared again. No broken locks. No missing footage this time. Just gone. I called the police, reported the body stolen. They searched. Found nothing. Case was closed. No suspect. No answers. A month later, a woman walked into the funeral home. Said her name was Lorraine Carter, Jonah's niece. She apologized for missing the funeral, then said something that stopped me cold. I had the weirdest dream last night. I saw my uncle. He was standing at the foot of my bed. Same clothes he used to wear. Same crooked smirk. But something was wrong with his eyes. They were low. I asked her what she meant. She said they looked like they'd been buried. She never came back. Sometimes I wonder if Jonah really died that day in the shop, or if death just didn't want him yet. I've worked with hundreds of bodies since then, but every time I step into the prep room at night, I glance at the table and expect to see him lying there. Mud on his boots, dirt under his fingernails, and that stitched-up grin that looks more and more like a warning. You ever feel watched? Not just the passing kind of glance from someone across the street. I mean the kind that crawls up your spine, freezes the back of your neck, and makes your gut whisper, "Don't turn around." That's how it started for me. We had just finished the service for a teenage girl, Emily Hart, 17 years old, car accident. Her parents were wrecked, completely hollowed out. They clung to each other during the service like they might slip off the earth if they let go. I remember her mother bringing in Emily's favorite white dress. She said it was what Emily wore to her junior prom. She looked like an angel, she told me. So that's what we dressed her in? White lace, pearled buttons, a silver pendant around her neck. Closed casket by request. The damage had been extensive. We held the service on a Sunday afternoon. I stayed behind afterward to clean up the chapel. It's vacuuming petals, extinguishing candles, adjusting chairs, stuff I usually do without thinking. But that night, something was off. It was the air. Too still, like the room was waiting. I shrugged it off, till I walked past the casket and heard a whisper. Just one word, soft, breathless, cold. I froze mid-step. The chapel was empty, completely silent. I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Grief does strange things to your brain, even secondhand grief, the kind that clings to you after too many funerals in a row. I turned to look at the casket, still sealed, still resting under the soft golden light. That's when I saw it. A small handprint. Right on the inside of the glass casket panel, the one no one's supposed to touch. It hadn't been there before. I would have noticed time meticulous. It was the size of a child's. Fingers splayed, palm pressed flat like someone had tried to reach through. I leaned in. The print was on the inside. Checked the lid. Still sealed. Still bolted. My chest went tight. I told myself it had to be a smudge. Maybe from the embalming process. Maybe someone leaned against the glass while we were setting things up. But the more I looked, the more certain I became. It had been made from the inside. Recently, the next night I stayed late, not out of bravery, out of obsession. I brought a space heater into the chapel. I kept the lights dim, sat in the back pew just watching the casket. At 2:12 a.m., the heater shut off. Power outage. Maybe, but the chapel lights stayed on. Only the heater died. Then, I heard it again. Cold. This time, it came from behind me. I turned slowly, empty pews, and the temperature dropped like someone opened a freezer. My breath fogged. And there she was, Emily, standing at the front of the chapel, wearing the same white dress, the same silver pendant, her head slightly tilted, her hair matted with something dark near the scalp. Her eyes weren't angry, just lost. She raised her hand slowly, pointed at the casket, then vanished. No dramatic exit, no scream, just gone. I approached the casket again, my hand shaking. Inside, the handprint was gone. But the pendant, it was missing. The next morning, her mother returned, said she'd had a dream the night before. Emily was cold, she told me. She kept shivering. She asked me where her necklace went. I didn't respond, just walked her to the chapel, opened the casket, and there it was. The pendant, back around Emily's neck, even though it hadn't been there hours earlier. We buried her that afternoon. I placed a heated stone in the casket with her. Sounds ridiculous, I know, but I wanted her to be warm. The chapel stayed cold ever since. Not freezing, just enough to notice. It's like someone's always standing in the corner, watching, waiting for spring. I've been a mortician for 19 years. I've seen just about everything. Overdose victims, fire fatalities, suicides. After a while, you stop asking why people die and focus more on how to help those left behind. But this time I couldn't stop asking questions. It started with a John Doe, no wallet, no ID. Found collapsed at a bus stop in the middle of summer, dressed in a heavy wool coat and gloves. The coroner ruled it as heart failure. No signs of trauma. The body was transferred to our funeral home for temporary holding. While local authorities tried to locate next of kin, I remember unzipping the body bag and immediately feeling something was off. His skin was waxy. Yes, typical for someone recently deceased, but his eyes, they weren't closed. They were wide open, like he died in shock. I tried to shut them, but they wouldn't stay. Every time I turned away, they seemed to reopen. I even used special adhesive. Didn't matter. By the end of the day, I gave up and placed a cloth over his face. That night, I stayed late to complete paperwork. Around 11:45 p.m., I went to retrieve something from the prep room. I remember it clearly. The fluorescent lights buzzing above, the faint hum of the refrigeration unit, and then silence. Total consuming silence. Not the absence of noise, the removal of it. It's like someone pressed mute on the world. Then I saw him, the John Doe. He was standing. Not on a gurney, not half-raised like in horror movies. Standing upright, facing the corner of the room like a child in punishment. Still wearing that long, dark coat. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just watched, and then He turned, but not like a person, not a pivot. It was all at once. 1 second, he was facing the wall. The next, he was staring directly at me, his eyes still wide open, unblinking. And he smiled. Not warm, not human. It was the kind of grin you feel behind your ribs. I blinked, just once, and he was gone. I chalked it up to stress, maybe a hallucination, lack of sleep, too many hours around formaldehyde and fluorescent lights. Until the next morning, the police called. All said they'd identified the John Doe. Only, it was a problem. They had already buried him in another county. 2 weeks prior, same name, same fingerprints, same dental records, exact same man. I asked them to double check. They did. Both bodies were identical. Every scar, every filling, every old injury. Identical. One was in the ground. The other was in my prep room. But only one was supposed to exist. When they came to retrieve him, I asked the officer, "So what do we do with this one?" He just shook his head. "We didn't come for a pickup," he said. "The body disappeared from the morgue last night?" I asked. "Disappeared?" As in, he nodded. "Gone. Steel tray pulled out, door wide open, no footage. It's no sign of entry, just missing. So now we had 2 of him. Or none." I checked our prep room, empty. The gurney was clean, too clean, like it had never held anyone at all. And the paperwork? Gone. Even his toe tag had vanished. I can't explain what happened. I've tried. But there are no answers that make sense, only possibilities that don't feel real. To this day, I still get anonymous calls. Always late, always the same voice, always the same question. Which one did you bury? And every time, I don't know how to answer. There's a certain reverence that comes with death, stillness that settles over the body like a final exhale. We, the ones left behind, dress that stillness with ritual. A viewing, a prayer, a final touch. It helps people let go, but some don't want to. It was a Thursday when Mrs. Halverson walked into the funeral home. She was in her late 70s, dressed in black from hat to heels. Veil gloves. A tiny purse clasped tightly in her hands. You'd think she stepped out of a 1940s photograph. "I'm here to see my husband," she said. Her voice was perfectly calm. To calm, I checked the schedule. There were no viewings booked that day. No Halvorsen on our list. Nothing on file. "I'm sorry," I told her. "We don't have anyone by that name." She smiled politely. "Yes, you do," she said. "He's in room 3. Now, room 3 hadn't been used in days. We reserve it for private family goodbyes. Small, quiet space. No frills. No noise. I told her it was empty. She tilted her head. Not angry, not confused. Just disappointed. "I'll wait," she said. "He always finds me." I didn't know what to say. Something about her presence made my skin crawl. Not from fear, but from an uncanny stillness, like she wasn't fully there. I offered her tea. She declined. I asked if she wanted to call someone. She didn't respond. She just waited. Hours passed. No one came to pick her up. No obituary for a Halvorsen appeared in the papers. Still, she returned the next day, the next. Always dressed the same, always asking for room 3. Finally, out of courtesy, and I admit curiosity, I set the room up. Flowers, soft music, a closed casket with no body. She thanked me. She sat beside it, stroking the casket lid as if it were skin, whispering under her breath, sometimes humming. And then she began leaving things, small gifts. A child's shoe, a faded black and white photo of a man in uniform, a cracked pocket watch that had stopped at 2:13 a.m. each night. I'd find these items on the lid of the empty casket. Each morning, they'd be gone. No one saw her take them back. No one saw anyone enter the room. We even installed a motion detector after a while. It never triggered. Then, one evening, I stayed behind. I watched through the cracked door as she sat there again, whispering into the wood. At one point, she said, "You never came back from the war, you know. Not really. But you always find your way home." She stood up, kissed the casket, and walked out. She passed right by me in the hallway. Only, I didn't feel the air move. Her scent lingered, lilac and dust. The next morning, I asked the front desk if she had signed in. They looked at me blankly. "Who?" "Mrs. Halverson," I said. She's been coming every day." They pulled up the log. Nothing. Not a single entry under that name. Just no video footage of her entering. No trace. I went to room 3. It was locked from the inside. When I finally pried the door open, the casket was gone. Only the cracked pocket watch remained. Still ticking. Still stuck at 2:13 a.m. Since then, room 3 stays locked. Not because we're afraid, but because it's no longer empty. Sometimes when I walk by, I hear humming, soft, loving, waiting. Thanks for joining me in the dark tonight. If any of these stories gave you chills, hit that like button and subscribe for more true-sounding horror tales. Have you ever experienced something you can't explain? Drop it in the comments. Love to hear your story, and if you know someone who enjoys a good scare, share this video with them. Because sometimes, the scariest stories are the ones that feel real. See you in the next one if you dare.